The UK has, since 1991, had a system of regulation which you could describe as very strict, but also quite permissive in the sense that it allows embryo research, but within some really, really tight boundaries. So scientists cannot do research on embryos unless they have a license from the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority to do that specific project. So they can't just say they want a general license to do anything they want. The specific thing that they want to do has to receive a license from the HFEA. In order to get a license, they have to demonstrate to the HFEA's license committee that the research that they want to do would be beneficial for a range of statutory purposes, such as improving IVF treatment. And they have to prove, and this is perhaps quite a high bar, they have to prove that the use of embryos is necessary for that research. That means you couldn't do that research using stem cells or using other tissues or using animals. You have to prove that you could only do this research using human embryos. So, for example, if you want to do some research which is aimed at improving storage of human embryos through IVF to make sure that embryos are more likely to survive, or improve implantation rates, for example, you'd need to use human embryos in order to do that, because you're obviously wanting to find out how human IVF will work. But what that means is that you couldn't use embryos to do research that you could do on other tissues. So toxicity testing, for example, you can do that on other tissues. You don't need to use human embryos, so you couldn't get a license to do that sort of thing. The 14-day rule is an absolute red line in the regulations that we have in this country, and it has been since they were put into place. The 14-day rule is that scientists must not culture embryos in vitro for more than 14 days. So they cannot keep them growing in a laboratory for more than 14 days. That would be a criminal offence, and scientists could go to prison if they did that. So it's a very, very strict line. And the reason for that is to really promote public confidence that we don't have scientists growing embryos in laboratories and doing all sorts of things to them. That 14 days is an absolute line. They can't keep them beyond that. At 14 days, an embryo is really not visible to the naked eye. We're talking about something that's very, very, very tiny. We're not talking about something that looks like a baby at all. So I think the idea that this is done just only in the very, very earliest stages, when you've got cells dividing, but you've got something that's like a pinprick, basically, is meant to preserve confidence in the strictness of the regulation. They're stored in liquid nitrogen, which keeps them at a very, very low temperature. So they'll be stored in little vials, sometimes called straws, that are put into a big vat of liquid nitrogen, which can be taken out. So embryos can be stored like that for many years. You wouldn't be able to tell from the embryo itself, and the identity of the donors won't be revealed to them. So although the people who donate their embryos will have given consent for their embryos use in the project of research, so none of this happens without people consenting for the use of their embryos in research, they're not their information isn't given to the researchers. One of the other things that's really important, I think, as part of this public engagement that I think needs to happen, is to really be clear with the public about what the benefits of embryo research have been, so that people understand why people want to do this. One thing that, of course, many members of the public are aware of is that IVF doesn't always work. In fact, it fails quite often. And that one of the reasons why people want to do this sort of research is to improve the outcomes for patients undergoing IVF, so that they're more likely when they have an IVF cycle to end up with a baby. So it's not that people want to do this just because they're interested in it. There are some really concrete potential outcomes for patients.